Welcome, everybody, inside the coach's office. I'm your host, Dan Murphy, alongside my co host, Brian Barnes. And we're scheduled to have a special guest today. Unfortunately, the podcast gods are not doing us any favors today. And Scott unfortunately, his power went out and is unable to jump on. So we're hoping we can reschedule later in the week, hopefully before the Tigers start their season on Thursday. But Brian, we're going to jump in. We're just going to jump in and talk a little bit about basketball and Michigan State. But before we get started, how's your weekend going?
Hey, well, it's well, man. Just a lot of sports, really busy. Had a good girls flag football practice yesterday with my daughter's team, so that was a lot of fun. And ready to talk. Scott's great. Can't wait to talk Tigers with him. I'm sure a lot of you listen to him on Locked On Tigers podcast, and we can't wait to have him on. So hopefully later on in the week, like you said, we get to do that, and you and I can catch up on some exciting college hoops.
Yeah, it might actually work out better, especially if we can get it done Wednesday night, because we'll have a better idea what the Tigers roster is going to be for opening day. And still a lot of questions about Kevin McGonigal, if he's going to make the team. I think it should be a foregone conclusion, but we should find out in a few days. But definitely looking forward to talking to Scott. Hopefully we can get that rescheduled later in the week. But Brian, outside of the Tigers, everybody's excited for that on Thursday. But man, it is March Madness, and both the local teams had a great first weekend. Four really dominating performances. Michigan is the 1 seed, beating Howard and then beating St. Louis yesterday. And Michigan State also advancing to the Sweet 16 with a great first weekend. What are your overall thoughts and about Michigan and Michigan State advancing to the Sweet 16?
To your point, they're both playing really well, and they both dominated their first round game, and that second round game was going to be really interesting, right? So because Michigan, I heard a lot of local radio people talking about how they were afraid of St. Louis, not afraid of St. Louis, but like concerned because St. Louis is pretty good and was playing at a pretty high level. I mean, when you blow out Georgia and you blow out an SEC team in the NCAA tournament like that, put over 100 on them, that'll open some eyes. And so it was obviously competitive for a while. I think Michigan was up, 4 at halftime, something like that. And then like a lot of their games this year, just blew the doors off them the rest of the game. And so, again, Yaxel Lendenborg, arguably the best player in the country. I know other people will say the young freshman, but like, man, he's just a man-child out there, and he did some things. And then for Michigan State, beating an ACC team in Louisville, right, who's had a decent season. And I felt like that game, watching it, Michigan State probably could have been up by like a lot more at times in the game than they were. They ended up winning by 8, but I felt like at times they were way better, and they did have a lot of turnovers and things like that. But one of the things that'll be interesting to see for Michigan State is all year they talked about scoring, or I've talked about scoring, and they're starting to kind of get some scoring and shooting from guys that they really didn't all year, or that was kind of sporadic all year, and Kerr Tang and Trey Fort especially. And so again, if they can find that consistent shooting these next couple weeks, they might be a Final Four team along with Michigan. I still think Michigan now, like especially when you watch what's going on with the other top seeds, like Duke just doesn't look healthy. They won. They beat TCU by a lot still, but they just look off. And so I think Michigan fans, both fan bases, have a right to feel good right now. But Michigan to me is still the clear favorite, which is funny because one of my favorite things that happens in March Madness is like, you'll go to a website and they re-rank the teams that are left. And so as of yesterday, ESPN had Arizona 1, Duke 2, Florida 3, and then Michigan not till 4. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. You know what I'm saying? And again, I'm not a Michigan slappy.
I don't know what more they needed.
I don't know. Like, what are you waiting on? Right? Like, so that's shocking to me. But should be fun. I mean, and again, in Michigan, I feel like we felt their bracket, or their part of the bracket wasn't all that wasn't as tough as some of the other ones already. Then you think about it, if they play Texas Tech's down their best player, right? Iowa State, their best player isn't going to be playing today against Kentucky. Like, there's a lot to like about Michigan, like in terms of their path to the Final Four.
I think the biggest thing that caught my attention watching both these teams is just the difference of styles and the styles and games that we've watched from both Michigan and Michigan State. You watch Michigan put up almost 100 points and win their game against St. Louis, while Michigan State, they're more in the 70s, and it's a typical Tom Izzo Michigan State team, right? Like, just absolutely, dogs on defense and making shots when they need to. And, Jeremy Fears is still continuing his great play that he had in the regular season, and continues to rack up the assists and get his players in good positions for shots and layups. And he continues just to be one of the best players in the country.
Yeah, for sure. And again, LJ Cason's injury at some point, we talked about that a lot. I wonder at some point, because Michigan, talent-wise, their roster has obviously been better than the two teams they've played by a lot. And so at what point, when that talent gets a little bit closer, does that come to hurt them? But it might not. I mean, again, when you have the NBA type guys that they have, you can overcome, a backup point guard, right? You should be able to overcome a backup point guard. So I agree. A lot to be excited about. And we talked about on the last show, if these two teams happen to meet in the national championship game, I know that's still a long ways off, but wow, that would be wild.
Yeah, I think Brian Anderson, the announcer at the end of the Michigan State game, was talking about it, and he brings it up. And we heard it, before, when the Seth Greenberg brought it up, that was his prediction for Michigan State, and that's what we're hoping for. But it keeps getting brought up, by pundits and analysts that's definitely a possibility.
Well, I mean, don't kid yourself. I think Michigan's going to be there, and I've said that for months now. And I think any Michigan State fan would tell you the same thing. Like, they're just loaded. Michigan State, are they going to hold their end of the bargain? Right. That's really what it comes down to. But I mean, they're playing well, and it'll be interesting. Like, you'll know more about them today. UCLA and UConn, that's who Michigan State is going to play in the next round. And whoever wins that game, how does Michigan State match up with UConn? Right. They have the championship pedigree, and they're obviously loaded too, but they're flawed as well. So, but it's not as crazy as a thought as it was like when the bracket first came out.
If UCLA is able to pull off the upset on UConn, I would feel. Obviously, you're getting the easier opponent in UCLA, but from Michigan State standpoint, they lost to UCLA in the Big Ten tournament. Yeah. But man, I feel like that's such a big advantage to have Tom Izzo to be able to have all that game footage for the the game plan off of just that they just played a few weeks ago.
Sure.
I think that's a huge advantage for Michigan State if they end up getting UCLA.
Yeah, obviously, Michigan State earlier in the year blew out UCLA by 20. I think. It's not. Yeah, Michigan State would be favored in that game, and they would definitely be a favorite. Yeah, to get to the Elite Eight.
Even as good as UCLA is playing right now.
Correct, of course.
I just feel really good if I was Michigan State if I
maybe
UCLA.
And maybe we're not giving Connecticut enough credit. Like they've really only had one you would call a bad loss this year. They lost to Marquette, right? Which teams are allowed to lose and have bad games, but their other losses were to St. John's and then Arizona. So it's not like they're bad.
No, that's what I'd say. I think UConn's going to win. I actually think they're going to get past Michigan State, unfortunately. But if I'm a Michigan State fan, I'm definitely rooting for UCLA tonight, even if Michigan State did lose to them, just last week. I would be rooting for them to get that revenge, but also for the better matchup.
Of course. No, I agree.
And we still think in Michigan's side that it's still, despite, the injuries, that Iowa State is still really the only team that we think is going to give them issues.
Yeah. It definitely doesn't help now that, what's his name? Jamar Jefferson's, he's not playing today. There was no break on his ankle, but it looked like one of those typical came down on his ankle and it rolled really bad and didn't look good. So if they can get by Kentucky today without him, I still think those two teams will meet in the regional final. But you never know. I was impressed. Maybe, and we go back to this. Virginia maybe isn't a team that's talked about enough. They theoretically were in position to beat Duke in the ACC tournament final. Maybe we're not giving them enough credit, but we still think Iowa State.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely exciting. And Michigan and Michigan State both had, like we said, great first weekend and advanced to the Sweet 16. Want to talk about another team locally, the Detroit Pistons, Brian, Cade Cunningham. I see that. It's just man, we're just not allowed to have nice things. When it is a Pistons fan, because do you think the Pistons are the number one team in the East, competing for the number one seed overall in the NBA? Cade Cunningham looks like he's potentially going to win the NBA MVP. And then you get this fluke injury, diving for a loose ball, and he gets knee to the side and a collapsed lung. And it's very, it's not a very common injury. But especially for somebody like Cade, who dominates on both sides of the floor, very rarely comes out of the game. It's going to be a very difficult injury to come back from. Where do you think this puts the Pistons? And man, how worried are you for the Pistons now as we get closer to the playoffs?
I mean, between that and Dylan Larkin's injury recently, right?
Yeah, just brutal,
right? Like, I mean, it's like, again, it's like Tigers losing Skubal. It's like the Lions losing Jameer Gibbs, whatever. Like, not ideal. It's nice of the Pistons that, like, they obviously clinched a playoff spot, right? And so they're going to be a playoff team, which is good. But in terms of, I mean, it depends on the severity of the injury. We really don't know, right? We kind of have a timeline, a couple weeks, but like I'm no expert, when it comes to collapsed lung and what the recovery is like there and working through that and whatnot. So, I mean, hopefully, like the Pistons have a cushion where they'll probably be a 1 or 2 seed in the East no matter what, right? Even if they do falter a little bit down the stretch, which we don't think they'll collapse completely. So that's at least a good thing. And then hopefully when Cade comes back, they'll be about ready to get to the playoffs and still feel like even without him, they'll probably be a favorite, I would think, in that first round matchup with whoever it is. But obviously you lose him, and let's say he's not in the like their ceiling is much lower than it is with them.
It's just so unfortunate, man, because it felt like they were going to cruise to the 1 seed, and Cade would win the MVP, and a special season for the Pistons. And then, man, just one fluke play, diving for a loose ball, and it can all fall apart, man. It's so frustrating because, like you mentioned, Dylan Larkin with the Red Wings. I mean, the same thing happened last year with Larkin. He got hurt, and then the Red Wings started to collapse, and they ended up missing the playoffs. We're hopeful it's not going to be the same situation, just a deja vu situation with the Red Wings. They're kind of playing 500 hockey right now, hanging on to that last playoff spot. But man, injuries just, obviously we've seen what happened to the Lions the last 2 seasons, really crushed their hopes, Super Bowl contention hopes. And now we're seeing it with the Wings and the Pistons, man. It's frustrating.
Yeah. And it's a great unknown. You just don't know sometimes with injuries, right? And that's not something you can predict. And so, like you said, the good thing is they are pretty far ahead. They're the clinched playoff spot. They'll still probably finish 1 or 2, but yeah, I mean, they're not championship caliber without the best player in the league.
No. And fortunately, the Pistons have actually played pretty well when Cade has not been in the lineup. Guys have really stepped up, especially Dennis Jenkins has really stepped up at the point guard position when Cade's been out. So I think their record's like 7-2 when Cade's out. But obviously, you get in the playoffs, it's a whole different deal. Like if you don't have Cade in the playoffs, like getting out of the first round is going to be tough. I think they'll still be able to sneak out. But that first round series is going to be a heck of a lot tougher. You might be thinking, you might go 6 or 7 games to get out of there if Cade's not back, or if Cade's, limited when he comes back.
Yeah, it's definitely not a good thing. Like if it's a situation where with Cade they're going to sweep a team, and then like you're saying, instead they got to go 6, 7. That's like okay, 6, 7. But they go game 6. You have to go 6 games or 7 games. That's not ideal either. So just unfortunate all around.
From a positive standpoint, though, I was listening to Kendrick Perkins on ESPN. He brought up a good point. He's like, this could be, a blessing in disguise, assuming Cade is back for the playoffs, right? Because it gives you an opportunity for guys to step up, and it forces Bickerstaff to have to adjust. And maybe you find, somebody that can step up and pick up his game heading to the playoffs, whether it's Jenkins or maybe even Duncan Robinson. I was seeing some things on Twitter today about, maybe they can get Robinson more involved and look back at film at how the Heat used him when they made a run to the finals where Robinson was a big factor, because that's a guy that's definitely going to need to step up regardless, with this Cade injury or not. They're going to need more outside shooting, and that was a big concern at the deadline that the Pistons weren't able to acquire some more outside shooting, and Herter doesn't look like he's going to be a factor, the player they got from the Bulls. So they're going to need Duncan Robinson to be more primary, their outside shooter. So maybe this time will allow them, maybe Bickerstaff is able to game plan to get those guys more involved and develop some more outside shooting before they hit in the playoffs.
Well, what it reminded me of is, do you remember when Steve Yzerman was out for the year and Sergei Fedorov, I think it was 94, 95, ended up being the MVP of the NHL that year? because Sergei Fedorov took on, the additional responsibilities of all the things Steve Yzerman was doing, and he took over. Like maybe that's somebody like Jalen Duren right now going down the stretch while Cade is out. Like he becomes that, and he becomes like the guy and ready to take over and be the go-to guy at the end of the games going forward. But yeah, you're right. It's next man up mindset to a degree, right?
Yeah, just to follow up on that point, you've seen it with the Celtics. With Brown becoming, an MVP caliber player while Tatum's out, and potentially maybe Tatum comes back, and now you got 1-2 punch with those guys. Maybe it's a similar situation where Duren's really upgrading his game and playing at a very, very high level. And when Cade comes back, now you got two absolute studs.
Has to happen. Like non-negotiable for them to be successful. Like that has to happen.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Well, Brian, a pretty abbreviated show today, but final thing, I wanted to talk a little bit of Tigers. Obviously we're going to talk with Scott, in the next few days, hopefully, and do a full preview. But we've kind of done this every week. Like anything standing out as far as spring training, over the last week that kind of jumps out to you?
No, we can't wait. We can't wait to see what the final roster is going to be, because obviously we both think, and I'm pretty sure Scott feels the same way, Kevin McGonagall's going to be your starting third baseman or shortstop. Yeah. I think he's obviously it's going to happen.
He's a starting infielder. Right?
He's a starting infield. Yeah. And I saw a tweet that said if he makes the roster out of spring training and wins the Rookie of the Year, the Tigers get a comp pick, first round pick, right? Which is
so yeah. Regardless, if he wins the Rookie of the Year, it doesn't matter if he starts on opening day or comes up a few weeks later. If he wins the Rookie of the Year, they get a first round comp pick, which was the same thing they used to draft him a couple years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Which would be pretty sweet. Yeah. Again, still he stands out. And I know you were questioning the KZ Mize spring training. It was announced that he's the number 5 starter. So like, I think what you get out of him, right, you would take that at the 5 spot, right? I mean, you're going to take a Casey Mize at the 5 spot and he'll be just fine. Like where last year he was their 2. It felt like 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Right. And now he's your 5. Like just goes to show you now how much better their pitching rotation is than it was this time a year ago. And we thought it was pretty good this time a year ago. So,
well, the other thing too is, Casey Mize, we saw a lot in the playoffs where he would, pitch 3 innings and they pull him and go to the bullpen. If you have Drew Anderson, especially, he's going to be your long reliever who's had an incredible spring. I thought he might compete for that 5th spot. And he probably would have if they hadn't brought in Verlander and Valdez. He absolutely would have contended. He probably would be in the rotation. But as of now, he's going to be the wrong reliever. Now you can have him, kind of piggyback with Mize and have, Mize go 3 or 4 and bring in Anderson for 3 or 4. That's kind of your 5th starting spot. And then he also got potentially Emmanuel DeJesus, who they added to the 40-man roster. We'll see if he actually makes the opening day roster or if they try to, have him get some starts in Toledo. But if he's up there too, now you got another guy who can go, additional innings if you need it.
I know. And still I'm hoping, like, I think after the roster gets announced, hopefully then we can have that conversation with Scott. Like, who's the odd man out? Like, or maybe it's multiple guys, right? Like, we still don't know the outfield, how that's going to shake out and where Colt Keith's going to play every day. And that's the thing we just talked about. Like, if we just said McGonigal and Baez maybe are your left side of the infield, okay, where is Colt Keith? It can't be your full-time DH because then what do you do with Kerry Carpenter, right? I mean, there's a lot's going to shake out in a couple of days.
Yeah, I really do wonder what they're going to do with McGonigal. I think it's got to be a lock that he's going to be up opening day, but I don't know if it's a lock that he's the starting shortstop or the starting third baseman, because we see him quite a few days now playing third base and look great over there. Yeah. He made an outstanding play. I think it was yesterday, a diving stop to start a double play. And that was the question for him, regardless of what position he played, was his defense going to hold up and be major league caliber? We know the bat's going to be there, but could the defense be there? And he's checked every single box that he had for him going into spring in order to make the roster. So assuming he is the opening day starter, if he's not the starting shortstop and he's starting third base, like, again, you're putting Cole Keith in a terrible position again, where he doesn't know really where he stands.
Correct.
So I wonder, but if they start him at shortstop and you start Cole Keith every day at third, then where's Javi Baez playing? Does he become the starting center fielder?
Chain reaction, and then what do you do? What happens with Parker Meadows? What happens with Matt Vierling? Who Matt Vierling's had a decent spring. Parker Meadows is better toward the end than he was at the beginning, right? Like, I don't know.
Wenzel Perez.
Wenzel Perez, I know.
Switch hitter who can play both corner outfields.
A lot of good things. I know.
And we know Hinch loves the versatility of that. Yeah. He's the only switch hitter on the team.
Yeah, good problem to have. Definitely. It's a good problem to have. But a lot of questions still to be answered in the next couple of days. We know the rotation at least, right? We know how the bullpen's going to work. We know the rotation. Now, what's the lineup going to look like, and what are the positionings going to look like?
It's definitely exciting. Definitely exciting times right now, Brian, in Detroit sports. And like I said, hopefully we can get Scott on here later in the week to break down the Tigers fully and do a full Detroit Tigers preview. But Brian, we can do it for that. Any final thoughts before we log off here?
Nope. Looking forward to it. And go enjoy the rest of your day. And we'll talk Wednesday. And literally 4 days from now, Major League Baseball Tiger season is here.
Every day. Baseball on
until November.
Games that matter every day.
Until November.
Can't wait.
Awesome.
Well, that will wrap it up for us today. For Coach Barnes, I'm Dan Murphy, and we'll see you again in a few days.